I used to think solo travel was the best kind of freedom. No waiting on anyone. No arguing over stops. No awkward silence with people you barely knew. Just you, the road, your music, and wherever you decided to go next. But sometimes, when you're driving alone for hours, especially at night, the road starts to feel different. The empty highways, the little towns that seem forgotten, the gas stations with one flickering light, the feeling that nobody would hear you if you screamed, it all starts getting in your head. The stories in this video all come from people who were traveling alone, just trying to get somewhere, and ended up in situations they still can't fully explain. These are 3 true horror road trip stories from solo travel. A couple years ago, I decided to take a solo road trip from Pennsylvania down to Tennessee. I'd gone through a rough breakup a few months before, and I thought the drive would help clear my head. I didn't have some perfect plan either. I just booked 2 cheap nights in a cabin outside Gatlinburg, packed a bag, and left early on a Thursday morning. The first half of the trip was actually great. It was cold out, late November, and the weather matched my mood in a way that felt weirdly comforting. The sky stayed gray all day, and every few hours it would start drizzling just enough for the windshield wipers to keep moving. I had coffee in the cup holder, a playlist going, and for the first time in a while, I felt calm. By the time it got dark, though, I was still a few hours from where I planned to stop for the night. My phone GPS had me taking a route through a long stretch of highway that cut through wooded areas and small towns. Nothing unusual, but it was one of those drives where after 9 p.m., everything starts to feel abandoned. Fewer headlights. Fewer open businesses. Longer gaps between gas stations. At around 10:30, I realized I needed to use the bathroom pretty badly, and I also wanted to stretch my legs. I'd passed signs for a rest stop a few miles ahead, so I figured I'd stop there, use the bathroom, maybe grab a snack from a vending machine, then get back on the road. The sign for the rest stop looked old. The reflective letters were faded, and one of the corner posts was bent. Still, the place was listed on the GPS too, so I didn't think much of it. When I pulled in, the first thing I noticed was how empty it was. Not a few cars. Empty. Completely empty. No trucks. No parked cars. No RVs. Nothing. Just my headlights sweeping over cracked pavement, a low brick building, and a picnic area behind it near the trees. The overhead lamps in the lot were on, but only 2 of them worked. They gave off that dull orange light that doesn't really make you feel safer. It just makes everything look sick. I parked close to the building. The engine ticking after I turned the car off sounded way too loud. So did the wind. I remember just sitting there for a few seconds, looking at the building and feeling this stupid hesitation. It wasn't fear exactly. More like that instinct that tells you something feels off, even if you can't explain why. But I told myself I was just tired. I grabbed my phone, locked the car, and hurried inside. The rest stop building was worse on the inside. The lights buzzed overhead, bright but cold, and there was this smell of wet paper towels, old mop water, and something else under it that I couldn't place at first. The vending area was small. 2 machines against the wall. One was dark. The other had maybe 3 bags of chips in it, and a couple rows of drinks. No employee desk. No workers. No janitor. Nobody. Just silence. I headed for the women's bathroom. The door was propped open slightly, and the light inside was on. There were 4 stalls. All empty. I used the bathroom, washed my hands, and while I was drying them under one of those weak air dryers, I heard the front door of the building open. The sound echoed through the whole place. Then footsteps. Slow footsteps. Not hurried. Not casual either. Just steady. I turned the dryer off and listened. The footsteps stopped. That made me instantly tense up. I stayed still for a second, then peeked out of the bathroom doorway into the vending area. There was a man standing near the entrance. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, maybe late 40s or early 50s. His hair looked wet or greasy. He wasn't doing anything strange exactly. He was just standing there. But he wasn't looking at the vending machine. He was looking down the hall toward me. We made eye contact for maybe a second. Then he smiled. Not friendly. Not normal. Just a stiff, closed-mouthed smile that didn't reach his eyes. I gave a quick awkward nod and walked past him toward the vending machine, mostly because I didn't want him to think I was nervous. He didn't move out of the way right away. He shifted only at the last second, still smiling, and I caught this smell when I passed him. Dirt, body odor, and something metallic. I pretended to look at the drink machine, but really I was using the reflection in the glass to keep an eye on him. He had turned and was watching me again. Then he said very calmly, "Long drive?" I looked over at him and said, "Yeah. Just passing through." He nodded slowly. "Traveling by yourself?" The way he asked it made every alarm bell in my head go off. Not because it was some insane question. Just because of the tone. Like he already knew the answer and wanted to hear me say it. So I lied. I said, "No, my boyfriend's outside." His face changed for half a second. Barely noticeable, but enough. That smile tightened. Then he said, "Didn't see another car." I laughed a little, trying to act relaxed. "He parked around the side. He's on the phone." That was a stupid lie too, because I didn't know if there even was another side. The man kept staring at me. Then, after a weird pause, he said, "You should be careful out here." I didn't answer. I just pressed the button for a bottle of water I suddenly didn't even want. The machine dropped it. I grabbed it, said, "Have a good night," and walked toward the exit. He stepped aside again. This time he said nothing. I pushed out through the front door and got hit by the cold air. My car was right where I left it, alone under the weak lot light. But something felt wrong immediately. I looked toward the driver's side. My stomach dropped. My driver's side door was open. Not wide open. Just cracked. At first I genuinely thought maybe I had forgotten to close it all the way. Then I saw that my interior light was on, and I knew I hadn't. I always double-check my locks. Always. I froze for maybe 1 second. Then I heard the rest stop door open behind me. I turned. The man had stepped outside. He wasn't smiling anymore. He stood there under the building light and said, "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. I went straight to my car, opened the back seat door instead of the front, and leaned in like I was grabbing something. Really, I was checking if anybody was inside. I don't know what I expected to see. A person in the back seat. Someone crouched down. I don't know. Nobody was there. But my glove box was open. And the contents of my center console were on the passenger seat. Somebody had been going through my car. I stood up so fast I banged my head on the door frame. The man had walked a little closer. Not rushing. Just slowly crossing the pavement. I slammed the back door shut, ran to the driver's side, got in, and locked the doors. By the time I looked up, he was only about 20 feet away. He stopped walking. Then he lifted one hand and motioned downward with his fingers, like he was telling me to roll the window down. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys before getting them in the ignition. The engine finally turned over, and the headlights lit him up fully. I'll never forget his expression. It wasn't angry. It wasn't panicked. It was disappointed. Like I had ruined something for him. I threw the car into reverse so hard the tires screeched. I backed out crooked, almost hit a curb, then sped toward the exit. As I was leaving, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still standing there in the middle of the lot, watching me go. I drove for maybe 10 minutes before I pulled over at a brightly lit gas station near a town. There were other cars there, people inside, country music playing over outdoor speakers. The normalness of it all almost made me cry. I parked under the main light and checked my car more carefully. Nothing valuable had been taken. My charger cords were moved. Registration papers pulled out. My tote bag searched. Even the zipper on my suitcase in the back had been opened. It felt less like robbery and more like someone checking what I had, or how alone I really was. I went inside and told the cashier what happened. He was an older guy and didn't seem surprised enough for my liking. He asked me where the rest stop was, and when I told him, he frowned. Then he said, "That place is supposed to be closed." I said, "What?" He repeated it. "They shut that one down a while back. Plumbing issues or something. I don't know. People still pull in there sometimes because the sign never got covered." That didn't make sense. The lights had been on. The building was open. The cashier shrugged and said maybe highway workers had it unlocked, but then he added, "I wouldn't go back there." Yeah. No kidding. I stayed at a motel in that town instead of finishing the drive. The next morning, after barely sleeping, I called the local non-emergency police number and explained what happened. The woman on the phone took down the details, but she sounded like there wasn't much they could do since the guy never actually touched me and I couldn't prove anything was stolen. Still, something kept bothering me. I opened my map's history and found the location from the night before. Then I searched the rest stop online. A few results came up, mostly old forum posts and map listings. One local article from over a year earlier mentioned that the rest area on that stretch of Route 16 had closed after repeated vandalism and multiple incidents involving travelers reporting suspicious persons in the parking area. That line stuck with me. Multiple incidents. Later that day, before I got too far south, I stopped at a diner for breakfast. I ended up mentioning the whole thing to the waitress after she asked why I looked exhausted. She listened, then got very quiet when I told her the location. She said, "My cousin worked county dispatch for a while. There were calls about that place." I asked what kind of calls. She gave this uncomfortable shrug and said, "People saying someone was trying to wave them down. Someone checking cars. A woman once said she thought somebody got into her back seat while she was in the bathroom, but they didn't find anybody." That alone was enough to make my skin crawl. But then she added one more thing. She said, "There was another story too. Don't know if it was true. Something about a guy being found out in the woods behind the rest stop with a bunch of IDs and phones." I just stared at her. She shook her head like she regretted saying it. Could have been rumor. Maybe it was. Maybe all of it was. Maybe the man at the rest stop was just some creep who tried my car door and backed off when he realized I wasn't an easy target. That's the explanation I tried to accept. But there's one part one didn't tell the cashier. Or the police. Or the waitress. After I checked into the motel that night, I reached into my coat pocket for my lip balm. Instead, I pulled out something I had never seen before. A folded piece of receipt paper. It was dirty, soft from being handled too much, and it had one sentence written on it in blue pen. You shouldn't lie about being alone. I still have that note. And I know for a fact it wasn't in my pocket before I went into that rest stop. This happened to me in Colorado in the fall of 2022. I'd been doing a solo road trip through a few western states, just taking my time, hiking during the day and finding cheap motels at night. It was honestly one of the best trips I'd ever taken. Most of the time I stayed on the bigger highways, but one afternoon I decided to take a scenic mountain route a local guy at a coffee shop recommended. He said it would save me some time and the views were incredible. He was right about the views. The road cut through tall pines, past rocky overlooks, and climbed higher than I expected. There were sections where I'd go 10 minutes without seeing another car. I didn't mind that at first. It was peaceful. The problem was I left later than I should have. I stopped too long at a trail overlook taking pictures, then took a wrong turn onto a side road that reconnected farther up the mountain. By the time I fixed it, the sun was already starting to dip behind the ridgeline. If you've ever driven mountain roads at dusk, you know how fast it gets dark. 1 minute everything's glowing orange, and the next minute you're in shadow and the trees start looking black. My phone's signal had already dropped to 1 bar, then none. The road narrowed too. No guardrail in some places. Just a steep drop on one side and a wall of rock on the other. I was gripping the steering wheel harder than I wanted to admit. At one point I came around a bend and saw a woman standing on the shoulder ahead. I hit the brakes immediately. She was maybe 50 yards away, standing near a wooden road sign. She wore a long gray coat and had dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. No car nearby. No house. Nothing. Just her. At first I thought maybe her car had broken down around the bend, or maybe she was hiking and got stranded. But as I got closer, I noticed something weird. She wasn't waving. She wasn't trying to flag me down. She was just standing there perfectly still, facing the road. I slowed to a crawl. When my headlights reached her, she lifted one hand. It was a small motion. Almost lazy. Like she already knew I'd stop. Every safety instinct I had told me not to. But I also knew that if she really needed help and I drove away, I'd feel like a piece of garbage. So I cracked my window only an inch or two and stopped with the doors locked. "Are you okay?" I called. For a second she didn't answer. Then she stepped closer into the headlights. She looked older than I first thought. Maybe late 40s. Her face was pale, and there was dirt on one side of her coat. Her eyes looked glassy, almost unfocused. She said very softly, "Can you give me a ride down the mountain?" I asked if she was hurt. She shook her head. I asked where her car was. She didn't answer that. She just said, "I need to get down the mountain before it gets too dark." Her voice was strange. Not creepy in an obvious way. Just flat. Like she was repeating something she'd said many times before. I remember glancing in my rearview mirror, then back at her. The woods around us were dead quiet. No birds. No insects. No wind. Just my engine idling. I asked if she had a phone. She said, no. Then she took another step toward my window, and that made me tense immediately. The smell that came in through the crack was wrong. Wet earth, old leaves, and something sour. I said, I'm sorry, I can call someone when I get service. She stared at me for a second, then said, please. I don't want to be here when they come back. That line hit me hard. I looked past her into the trees on the side of the road, expecting to see headlights or another person or anything. Nothing. Who? I asked. She turned her head slightly, like she was listening for something in the woods. Then she said, the men in the truck. That was enough for me to start feeling real panic. I should have just driven away then, but I froze because I didn't know if she was in danger or if this was some setup. I asked, did someone hurt you? She leaned closer to the crack in my window, and her face changed. Again, I can't explain it well. Not physically. It was just her expression. All the softness dropped out of it. She said, in a much firmer voice, let me in. Every part of me went cold. I hit the switch and rolled the window up fast. The second the glass closed, her hand smacked against it. Hard. I yelped, threw the car into drive, and hit the gas. She didn't scream. She didn't chase me. She just stayed in the road for a second in my mirror, then disappeared behind the bend. I drove way faster than I should have on that road. For the next 10 minutes I kept looking in the mirrors, half expecting headlights to come flying up behind me. Instead, I got something worse. Around another bend, I saw an old pickup truck parked partly off the shoulder. The driver's door was open. No one was inside. I remember my chest tightening so hard it hurt. I sped past it and kept going, but now I was sure of one thing. Either that woman was telling the truth about men in a truck, or she was connected to whoever owned it. A few minutes later I finally reached a wider section of road where there was a lookout area with a map sign and one covered information board. I pulled in because I needed to calm down and check whether I was even still on the right route. There were no cars there. The sky had gone fully dark now, and my headlights lit up the edge of the overlook and a line of pine trees. Beyond them there was nothing but blackness. I stayed in the driver's seat with the doors locked and used my phone flashlight to look at the paper map I kept in the glove box. That's when I heard it. A soft tap. On the rear passenger window. I don't think I've ever felt fear hit me that fast in my life. I whipped around, expecting to see the woman. There was nobody there. Then I heard another tap. This time on the trunk. Then another, on the driver's side rear door. I couldn't breathe. It sounded like someone circling the car slowly, tapping the glass and metal with their fingertips or maybe a ring. Tap. Pause. Tap. Pause. I started the engine again. The tapping stopped. I looked all around the lot with my headlights and interior light on. I saw trees, the signboard, the railing at the overlook, but no person. Then, from somewhere beyond the headlights, I heard a woman's voice. Not loud. Almost gentle. Please let me in. I slammed the car into reverse, backed out crooked, and nearly drove into the ditch before correcting. As I pulled back onto the road, my headlights swept the information board at the edge of the lot. There was something written across the map glass in what looked like mud. Or maybe blood, though I really hope it was mud. It said, "Turn off your lights." I stared at it for maybe half a second before the board disappeared behind me. I was shaking so badly I had to keep telling myself out loud to stay on the road. Just stay on the road. Don't crash. Don't crash. About 20 minutes later, I finally got to a small town with a gas station and one lodge. The gas station was closing, but there were still 2 guys inside. I went in and asked if there was another way down the mountain because something weird had happened on the road. One of the guys, an older man in a camo jacket, asked me which road. I told him. He and the cashier exchanged a look. That kind of look strangers give each other when they both know something and don't want to say it first. Then the older man asked, "Did you pick anyone up?" I said no. He nodded once and said, "Good." I asked him what that meant. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "People see a woman up there sometimes." I actually laughed a little, mostly out of nerves. "What does that mean?" The cashier spoke this time. "Could be a real person. Could be people messing with travelers. Could be a story. But there've been calls." "What kind of calls?" I asked. The cashier said, "Drivers saying someone stands in the road. Sometimes it's a woman. Sometimes they say she asks for a ride. Sometimes they say they hear knocking on the car after." I felt the blood drain from my face. I asked if anyone had been caught doing it. The older man said, "There was an accident up there years back. Woman's body found down an embankment after a storm. Before that, there were reports of people being robbed on the road by somebody faking car trouble. Which version do you want?" That didn't help at all. I stayed at the lodge across the street. I barely slept. Around 2 in the morning, I was sitting on the bed with the TV on low when I remembered something I hadn't checked yet. The back of my car. I don't know why, but I suddenly had this awful thought that someone had been hanging onto it or hiding behind it at the overlook. So I looked out through the motel curtains into the parking lot. My car was under a yellow light near the ice machine. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A handprint on the rear windshield. Not from the outside. From the inside. I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was faint, like it had been left in dust or condensation from an earlier time, but the shape was clear enough. Full palm. Long fingers. Pressed against the inside of the glass. I didn't go back out to the car that night. The next morning, in daylight, I checked it. The handprint was still there. I called myself every name in the book, trying to come up with some normal reason for it. Maybe I'd put a bag back there, and it smudged the glass. Maybe I touched it while cleaning. Maybe I was so scared I imagined the whole shape. But then I found something else. In the trunk, under the folded blanket and emergency kit, there was a small silver hair clip. It wasn't mine. I know that sounds like weak proof, but I was traveling alone. I had packed the trunk myself. I'm a guy. I don't use hair clips. Nobody else had been in my car during the trip. I kept that clip for a while, mostly because throwing it away felt wrong. When I got home, curiosity got the better of me and I searched local archives about accidents on that mountain road. I found an old article about a woman who went missing after her pickup broke down on the mountain in the late 90s. Her body was found days later below an overlook. The article mentioned she had dark hair and had last been seen wearing a gray coat. Maybe that was coincidence. A second article, years later, mentioned several travelers reporting attempted roadside scams and one suspected robbery crew using a stranded woman to flag down drivers in remote sections of the road. Maybe that was the real answer. But I still can't explain the tapping around my car when nobody was there. I can't explain the writing on the map board. And I definitely can't explain why, when I finally threw that silver hair clip away weeks later, I found a single pine needle wrapped tightly around it like it had been twisted there by hand. Because by then, I was back home in Florida. And there are no pine trees anywhere near my apartment parking garage. My last story happened during what was supposed to be the easiest trip of the three. I was driving from Texas to New Mexico for a weekend music festival and decided to break the drive in half with one overnight stay somewhere in West Texas. I booked the cheapest motel I could find through a travel app, mostly because I knew I'd just be sleeping a few hours and leaving early. The place was called the Desert Lantern Motel. It looked exactly like the kind of place you picture when you hear cheap roadside motel. One floor. U-shaped layout. Ice machine in the middle courtyard. Faded sign out front with a few letters burned out. The office windows had bars on them, which probably should have told me enough right there. I got there a little after 11 p.m. The road outside was empty except for a couple trucks passing now and then. The motel office was still open, but the fluorescent lights inside made everything look harsh and dirty. A little TV mounted in the corner was playing a game show with the volume low enough that all I heard was muffled clapping. The guy at the desk was probably in his 60s, heavy-set, with glasses and a face that looked like he didn't trust anyone. I gave him my ID and booking info. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen again. "You're alone?" he asked. That question, after my first two stories, would probably make me walk out now. But at the time I just said, "Yeah." He slid the key card across the counter. "Room 12. Then, after a pause, he added, "If anybody knocks tonight, don't answer." I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He just stared at me until the smile dropped off my face. Then he said, "Office opens at 6. I took the key card and asked, "Why would somebody knock?" He looked past me toward the parking lot before answering. "Just don't answer." That was it. I should have canceled right there. Instead, tired and annoyed, I grabbed my bag and headed to my room. The courtyard was dim, lit by a few overhead fixtures that left long stretches in shadow. There were maybe 4 or 5 other occupied rooms judging by the parked vehicles, but the place was mostly quiet. A TV played behind one curtain. Somewhere, water dripped steadily into a metal drain. The air smelled like hot pavement, dust, and stale cigarettes. My room was near the far corner. Room 12. The inside was slightly better than I expected, which wasn't saying much. Old floral bedspread, yellowed lamp shades, rattling AC unit, one chair by the window, and a bathroom with cracked tile around the sink. I locked the door, used the latch, and pushed the chair under the knob just because the front desk guy had creeped me out. Then I called my sister for a few minutes and joked about the place, saying if I got murdered, tell people I died because I was cheap. She told me not to say that. I showered, got into bed, and kept the TV on low for background noise. At around 12:15, I heard footsteps outside. Slow footsteps moving along the concrete walkway in front of the rooms. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath. A second later came a knock. 3 soft knocks. I didn't move. Then a woman's voice said, "Excuse me?" I stayed still. She knocked again. "I'm sorry. Can you help me?" Her voice sounded shaky, like she'd been crying. I sat up in bed and stared at the door. The old man's warning came back instantly. If anybody knocks tonight, don't answer. The woman said. Please. I think someone's following me. I wish I could say I completely ignored it, but I didn't. I got up and went closer, stopping a few feet from the door. Through the peephole, I could only see part of the walkway because the angle sucked, but I did see a woman standing near my door. She looked young. Maybe 20s. Long hair. Oversized hoodie. Head down. I said through the door, "You should go to the office." She answered right away, "It's locked." I checked the time. The office should still have been open when I got in, but maybe the guy had closed it already. I said, "Call the police." She said, "My phone's dead." Then, after a short pause, she added, "Please just let me stay in here for a minute." The wording of that snapped me out of my sympathy real fast. Not call somebody for her. Not come outside. Let her in. I backed away from the door and said nothing. After maybe 10 seconds, I heard her footsteps move off. I looked through the peephole again and saw nobody. I waited there another minute, then finally went back to bed, though I was too awake now to really sleep. Around 1 a.m., I heard another sound. This time it was from the wall on the other side of the bed. A knock. Not on my door. On the wall itself. 3 knocks. Then silence. Then 3 more. I sat up again and looked toward the headboard. My room shared that wall with room 11. I figured maybe the people next door were arguing or moving furniture or something. But then I realized I hadn't heard a TV, voices, or anything from that room since I checked in. Just as I was thinking that, I heard a muffled voice. Very faint. I got off the bed and leaned closer to the wall. It sounded like a woman whispering. I couldn't make out the words at first. Then I heard it again. "Don't open the door." I backed away so fast I almost tripped over my bag. I stood there staring at the wall, my heart pounding. Then came another whisper, a little clearer this time. "Don't let her in." I grabbed my phone and actually thought about calling 911, but I kept hesitating because I had no idea what I'd even say. "There's a whispering woman in the wall?" Before I could decide, my phone buzzed with a low battery warning. I plugged it in by the bed and kept listening. Nothing. No whispering. No knocking. Eventually I convinced myself that the sound had come from outside, or from the TV, or through pipes, or some other motel noise. At some point I must have dozed off. I woke up to pounding. Heavy pounding. On my door. It was still dark in the room. The TV had gone blue screen silent. For a second I didn't know where I was. Then the pounding came again, hard enough to rattle the chair I'd wedged under the knob. A woman's voice shouted, "Open up! Please!" I jumped out of bed and backed up. The pounding kept coming. "Please! He's here!" I looked at the clock. 3:27 a.m. Then, cutting through her voice, I heard something else outside. Footsteps running. A man yelling. Not words I could make out. Just an angry voice. Then a sharp scream from the woman at my door. Then silence. Total silence. I was shaking so hard I could barely dial, but I called 911. I told them I was at the Desert Lantern Motel and heard a woman screaming outside my room. They said deputies were on the way. I stayed on the line, staring at the door. After maybe 30 seconds, there was a gentle knock. Not pounding this time. Just one soft knock. Then another. And the same woman's voice, calm now, almost sweet, said, "He left." I didn't answer. the voice said. "Can you open the door now?" That was the moment I realized whatever was happening, I absolutely could not trust the person outside. No human being goes from screaming in terror to sounding completely calm that fast. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me until officers arrived. I heard their car first, then doors slamming, then voices outside. I opened my door only after one of them identified himself several times. The walkway was empty. No woman. No man. Nobody. One deputy took my statement, while the other walked the property with a flashlight. The motel office was dark but unlocked when they checked it. The old desk clerk was asleep in a chair in the back room and seemed irritated more than concerned. When they asked if he'd seen anyone, he said no. When they asked if there had been prior issues, he just muttered something about drifters and room hoppers. I asked them to check room 11. That was the room next to mine, the one where I thought I'd heard the whispering. One deputy knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. The desk clerk brought a master key, muttering the whole time that the room shouldn't be occupied. The deputy opened the door. The room was empty. Not just unoccupied. Empty. No bedspread. No towels. No toiletries. No suitcase. No TV on. It looked like it was being renovated or maybe stripped for parts. Mattress tipped against the wall. Dresser drawers missing. Bathroom curtain gone. I told them that was impossible because I'd heard a woman whispering through that wall. The deputy shined his light around and noticed something near the baseboard by the head of the bed. He crouched down and picked it up. It was a folded motel notepad sheet. He opened it, read it, and his expression changed. He handed it to me. Written in shaky pen were the words, "She knocks on every door." My stomach turned. I asked where it came from. He said it had been wedged between the mattress and the wall. That made no sense. The room wasn't supposed to be occupied. So who wrote it? The deputies searched the property, talked to the desk clerk again, and eventually told me there wasn't enough to keep them there much longer. No signs of assault. No visible blood. No damaged doors besides normal wear. They asked if I wanted them to wait while I packed up. I said yes. I threw my stuff into the car in record time and left before sunrise. But that's not the part that stays with me most. It gets worse. A week later, after I got home, I left a bad review for the motel online. Mostly about the desk clerk, the weird knocking, and how unsafe the place felt. A day after posting it, I got a direct message through the travel app from another user. I didn't even know people could do that. The message said, "Did they put you in room 12? That alone freaked me out. I replied yes. The person answered a few hours later. They said they'd stayed there 6 months earlier during a road trip and had been given room 12 too. Around the middle of the night, a woman knocked on their door crying and asking to be let in. They didn't open it. Later, they heard what sounded like knocking from the wall in the next room. Then the user sent one more message. "Did you hear the woman in room 11? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked how they knew about room 11. They replied, "Front desk guy told me not to worry about sounds from next door because the room was empty." That's when my skin started crawling all over again. Because that meant 2 different people, months apart, had been told the room next to them was empty, after both hearing a woman inside it. I asked them if they ever found out what happened there. They sent me a screenshot of an old local post from a community page. According to the post, Years earlier, a woman had been found dead in one of the motel rooms after trying to escape a man she'd come there with. The room number wasn't listed publicly, but rumors said she had gone door to door asking for help before she was dragged back. I know rumors online are garbage. I know that. So I tried to verify it. I searched local news archives and eventually found a small article about a suspicious death at that same motel over a decade earlier. It didn't give many details. Just that a young woman's body was found after guests reported hearing a disturbance overnight. No room number. No mention of knocking. Still, it was enough to make me wish I'd never looked. I would almost accept the haunted room explanation if not for one thing. Months after that trip, I was cleaning out my glove compartment and found the motel key sleeve from the desert lantern. I must have tossed it in there and forgotten about it. On the back of the sleeve, in pen, was something I know I did not write. It said, "Roommate was the first one she tried." That chilled me for two reasons. The first was obvious. The second was because I suddenly remembered something I hadn't thought about since that night. When the old desk clerk handed me the key at check-in, he looked at the screen, then at me, and paused before saying, "Room 12. Like maybe that wasn't the room he planned to give me. When I searched the motel photos online again, I counted the room layout from the office. Roommate was the one closest to the dark far corner of the property. Closest to the old back lot. And according to several newer reviews, that room had been permanently closed for maintenance. I still don't know what really happened there. Maybe there was a real woman going door to door at that motel, with someone helping her, trying to get into rooms to rob people. Maybe the whispering in room 11 was some cruel prank, or a note left by another terrified guest that I happened to find at the worst possible moment. Or maybe that motel was the kind of place where something awful happened once, and for years afterward, it just kept happening in pieces. What I do know is this. At 3:27 in the morning, when that woman was pounding on my door and screaming to be let in, I almost opened it. If I hadn't remembered the old man's warning, I probably would have. And every now and then, when I think about how calm her voice sounded right after the screaming stopped, I can't help feeling that whatever was outside my room that night wasn't trying to escape from someone. It was trying to get invited in. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories. If you want to share your story with us, send us at belladarktales@gmail.com.